Swiatek, back again. Rob, of course, speaking about somebody that needs no introduction, he's been coming up every year, bringing us the updates of what's happening in the field. If you don't know Rob, you're new to this biz. He is one of the most knowledgeable people on the planet. He doesn't like this. Oh, you're dying here. He's rather knowledgeable about the subject. And he's been studying this for a long, long time. In fact, Rob, sometime you and I should sit down and decide which one of us has been studying this the longest. It probably would be a tie. He was recently seen on a nationally broadcast television show talking about some of the stuff going on in Capitol Hill on News Nation network. He also was on Larry King Live back in the day when that was a part of the show. And we're so grateful that he's willing to come here every year and give us his updates on what's happening in the field.
Oh, you don't have to do that.
So if he can extricate himself from his wife, which is doubtful, come on down, Rob.
Thanks, Peter.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thanks. So I can just. Okay. Thank you, Peter. Some of what you said is true, some isn't. But I have been around for a long time, so that I'll concede. Best knowledgeable, I don't know. I'm not going to give you many answers here today, folks. But I do want to thank you for all coming. It's just a pleasure to see everybody. And Peter, thanks for having this again another year. And before I get started, I will have a PowerPoint presentation. I want to thank my wife, Susan, for making that PowerPoint presentation because I cannot do those things. I just don't know PowerPoint. But she made a nice, use the material I gave her, and I apologize if you can't see all the writing or some of the numbers on the slides, but I'll try to explain what's going on with them. And we'll see where it goes. Like I say, I'm not here, and I can't give you many answers to the UFO subject as to where these things are from, why they are here, how they're powered, anything like that. I don't profess to know, and some people do, and they might be onto it, but I am not. I approach it from a more conservative level. I'm on sort of step 1 or 2 of a 20-step ladder, maybe step 4. Some people are a little higher than I, step 10 or 11, and they may really know what's going on with the phenomenon, but I don't. I believe there's non-human intelligence behind it. I've been involved in the subject, like Peter said, for a long time, so I do know what characterizes the UFO phenomenon and how it's ebbed and flowed over the years since Kenneth Arnold had his sighting of saucers near Mount Rainier. What I wanted to do here with my talk was have like 4 segments of it. And it's going to go from segment number 1 being kind of nebulous and a little vague. And as it gets towards segment 4, I hope things will solidify a little bit. By the time we get to segment 4, I'll be at actual UFO sightings. So then we can say, this is what people saw in the sky. What'll be on some of the slides here. This is what they reported. Whereas some of the earlier stuff, as you'll soon see, it's a little bit of a different story. Sorry about that. I had to switch sides here because of the wires. And let's see where we go from here. I had to put this slide up, this cartoon up for Peter's sake. It's a figure 8 sitting on a chair, and it says to the psychologist, "No thanks, if I lie down, we never finish." So, you know, if you're in the psychology field, you do understand that. That's Peter right there on the right. Okay, let's start off with some nebulous somewhat. I won't use the word vacuous. I'll say nebulous, a little vague. The recent NASA Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena Independent Team Study Report. And you'll notice the UAP has gone from unidentified aerial phenomenon or phenomena to anomalous. So it's now encompassing a little wider array of events. This report came out in mid-September, about a month ago. I've taken a few quotes from this thing to just sort of give you a vague sample of it or a flavor of it in case you haven't had a chance to read it yourself. It's 33 pages long, I believe, with 5 or 6 pages being beautiful color photographs of the Earth and things in space and stuff like that. As far as I'm concerned, this whole report could be boiled down to 2 or 3 pages, with maybe one of those pages being a photograph. It's highly redundant. The NASA study team had 16 people on it. One of them actually worked at NASA, but they did try to pick independent people who were not associated or working for NASA, from academia, from other scientific laboratories, private labs in the US, and from some other government installations. So these 16 people, one of whom I think knew something about ufology, a woman named Anna Maria Berea, who teaches at George Mason University. I believe she's fairly well knowledgeable about the UFO subject, and the others aren't, including Scott Kelly, or one of the astronauts they had on there. I don't think those people had a clue, basically, as to what happened in the field of ufology before the New York Times article appeared in 2017. So they put together this report to give an idea as to whether NASA should get involved in the study of UFOs. And this is their conclusion in the beginning of the report. The NASA independent study team did not find any evidence that UAP have an extraterrestrial origin, but we don't know what these UAP are, NASA Administrator Bill Nelson said during a briefing shortly after the report's release. The top takeaway from the study is that there's a lot more to learn. And that's sort of their conclusion, repeated several times in the report. Well, there is evidence that UAP have an extraterrestrial origin. That's a false statement. It's not conclusive evidence, otherwise we probably wouldn't be having this meeting here today, because the UFO subject would be accepted by mainstream science throughout the world. And we would all know that at least UFOs were alien in some respects. So there is some evidence for it. But that's what Nelson said. There's a lot more to learn. Here's the head of the NASA team that will be working with the all-domain, the ARROW, the anomalous ARROW. Well, I'm getting the acronym messed up right now, but the DoD group that's looking into UFOs now, headed by Sean Kirkpatrick. And McInerney was working earlier with UFOs, I think, for ATIP before ARROW was formed. Man, there's so many acronyms to keep in your mind. Now he's been appointed as the liaison for the NASA study team. He will go to ARROW with NASA recommendations and vice versa, from ARROW back to NASA with any recommendations they may have, when NASA apparently is going to cooperate with ARROW to some not known extent. Here actually is the way they framed their recommendation at the beginning of their report. The earlier statement by Nelson was even broader. Although ARROW leads the whole of government response to UAP, the panel recommends that NASA play an essential role within that framework. The framework of the whole of government response, I guess. NASA should leverage its core capabilities and expertise to determine whether it should take a leading or supporting role in implementing a given recommendation. Very vague. Who knows what they really mean? It does sound like they intend to help ARROW. Here's another statement. In turn, the panel finds that there is currently no standardized system for making civilian UAP reports, resulting in sparse and incomplete data, devoid of curation or vetting protocols. That statement is 100% false and wrong. That's what I mean when I say these people had no idea where the UFO research had gone in 70 years. Obviously, APRO, Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, NICAP, and MUFON have been collecting UFO reports for 70 years and piling them up. MUFON has 3,000 plus cases this year already, many of which have been investigated, or as they might say, curated. So, yeah, they have been curated, and we do have vetting protocols, and we do separate the wheat from the chaff as investigators when we can in UFO reports. A lot of chaff, some actual wheat, but these people don't seem to know that. it's increasingly clear that the majority of UAP observations can be attributed to known phenomena or occurrences. It's increasingly clear. Researchers knew that in the early 1950s. Most cases are IFOs, okay? We all know that in this room. NASA panel just found out about it. It's becoming increasingly clear. I turned to a renowned scientist, James McDonald, who was associated with NICAP in the late 60s and 70s. He testified, in fact, in front of Congress in a briefing in 1968. McDonald was an atmospheric scientist at the University of Arizona. He died in 1971. But here's what he said, and he thought something was going on with UFOs. He said, the ETH, the extraterrestrial hypothesis, explains the data and the problems and the results we see in ufology. That explains all the data. And maybe other factors do too. Maybe other explanations can be called into play, but the ETH should be considered one of them. But he said, boy, Congress has been told over and over again by Air Force spokesmen that using the best scientific talent available, the UFO matter has been carefully investigated and shown to be a lot of misidentified natural phenomena. So there's something that was basically told to Congress back in '68. What we already knew that, like I say, Project Blue Book gave us a pretty good example of how they could take 100 cases and come down with 2 of them being unexplained. Here's another statement. I think that this might be the last one I'm going to torture you with from the NASA study, a team report. At this point, there's no reason to conclude that existing UAP reports have an extraterrestrial source. However, if we acknowledge that as one possibility, then these objects must have traveled through our solar system to get here. Well, there's some reason to conclude that they have at least a non-human extraterrestrial source. I don't know whether it's in this dimension or outside of this dimension in the 3D universe that surrounds us and goes out like 14 billion light years. How does NASA know they must have, or these people know they must have traveled through the solar system to get here? Scientists have postulated wormholes and other ways of cutting through different dimensions to go from, say, 30 light years away to the environs of the Earth here in a small fraction of the time it would take if you flew at the speed of light. It would take 30 years. So there could be many other ways that a civilization that's been around for, say, 1 billion years, more than we have found. So I get tired of these statements. It all sort of goes back to the philosophy and the mindset that if there really was something going on, all these educated people here would have known this. They wouldn't need us as UFO examiners and researchers and working in the field to tell them. They would know. Well, they missed the big story. That's all I can say. And they're starting from basically ground zero. They're not paying any attention to what has gone on in terms of reporting in the UFO field. And the NASA report even says they didn't study any cases, whatever, to come to their conclusions as to whether NASA should help AARO. And it seems to me that if you want to know what kind of evidence you find in the UFO field, you've got to look at the best unidentified cases. Who cares whether they didn't have sensor data? And they talk about sensor data ad infinitum and ad nauseum in this report. They must say 50 times that NASA has the greatest suite of sensors anybody has in the world. We can set these things up. We can look at UFOs from outer space, from satellites. Basically, they also say that we're going to use satellites to see whether there's a geographical or environmental connection to the UFO phenomenon. Well, here's another thing they didn't know. UFOs appear in all countries and over all types of terrain. There doesn't seem to be any place of the Earth they haven't gone over, including Antarctica, where they were seen. So is there an environmental something that causes them to appear more in one place than another? I don't know. Maybe there is. But you can see that they don't want to attribute intelligence to the UFO phenomenon. They don't quite say that, but that's what all their verbiage in these 33 pages points to. We get better sensors, we'll unravel this whole phenomenon. And be damned with eyewitness testimony. Eyewitness testimony is just not good. They almost said that in as many words. Well, we're all going to drive home after this meeting today, and we're all going to use our eyes to navigate along the road. And so we don't hit into another car, or we don't thump into a tree, or go through a stop sign, or run over an embankment, or whatever. Because eyewitness testimony and what the eye sees does reflect reality to a certain extent. So if a pilot sees a 30-foot diameter disc off his wing 30 feet away, you don't need sensors to know that what he saw can't be explained. That person's eyewitness testimony should be enough to do it. Uh-oh, another cartoon. That just means we're moving on to another segment. It's a weather balloon. Naturally, there was a bit of skepticism among the media regarding the official Air Force explanation, is the caption to the cartoon. That's basically, we haven't progressed much further beyond that today. Okay. Now we're going to undergo a series of encounters with circular charts. There won't be any cigar-shaped charts, but there will be circular ones. And even maybe a donut chart or two for you. I thought that I made some, I saw some things in some of these charts that I think are kind of eye-opening, believe it or not, as boring as graphs and charts can be. What is this one here? This is from the latest Arrow report that came out 4 days ago, I guess it was, on the 17th, I think, of June, this past week. I've gone through it, but I didn't have enough time to really incorporate many of the slides or statements from that report into my presentation here today. But this is one of the charts that's from it. And the latest report says that currently Arrow has 291 cases since its last report came out in June of 2022 or something like that. So 274 are new cases that Arrow hadn't seen, and an additional 17 that had been overlooked before have been added. So I think that should add up to 291. Anyhow, that's what they now say they have. And this chart, and now bear in mind that the people working in the Defense Department of Defense on Arrow, basically a lot of these people are scientists and technicians and engineers, very, very intelligent and educated people who should know a little bit better how to make a chart that tells you something. First of all, I assumed that this chart is representing a breakdown of by the slices of the 291 cases. Now, nowhere is it ever said in the report how many of the 291 are unidentified. It completely, they don't even mention that. They mention the fact that they can't explain all the reports, but they don't say how many. So I assume this chart represents IFOs as well as UFOs. So for example, half the chart is not reported. The shape wasn't reported for almost half of these 291. The rest of them break down on the upper left-hand side of the chart as follows. A cylinder right here, you may not be able to see it. The chart isn't even made to really be read by the human eye. It's not crisp. It doesn't stand out. It looks kind of nice, but in a publication, you want to clearly see stuff. I can't even see what the shapes are practically. But cylinder-shaped UFOs, 1%. Disc, 2%. Triangle, 1%. Rectangle, 2%. Orb, comma, round, comma, sphere. I have no idea what that means. Orb and sphere, yes. Round? Well, is that just a round object then, and that's not a disc? I don't know. And so how many of these were UFOs? It's just a complete puzzle. None of us know. And then they had one called ambiguous sensor contact. Did you see that? That's not even a shape. Morphology is the shape of things, the conformation of things. Ambiguous sensor contact. What kind of a shape generated that ambiguous sensor content. And it's not explained in the body of the report. You can go through it from now until sundown, and you won't see that. Here's another chart. This is mildly interesting. Most of the objects they saw had no lights, UFOs as well as IFOs. 79% no lights, 21% lights. Okay, it's mildly interesting. Now, in fairness to the government here, their 291 reports are, as they say, a biased sample. That is to say, they mostly come from military aviators. They say there's 290 cases were from aviators or the aviation field. One was maritime. One was maritime. Again, I don't know what that means. Was it seen by a crewman on board a ship? Was it seen by someone under the water? And the report doesn't get into that. But anyhow, so the report is biased. They don't have any seeming reports from people on the ground looking above them, where 100 feet above they see a cigar or an oval or something like that, which really does and has characterized the UFO phenomenon for the 70-some years since Kenneth Arnold, 76 years. So they're talking about cases seen at altitude. But this chart, this little presentation wouldn't tell you that. Reported UAP altitudes of the 291 cases. Well, of course, most of them are above 5,000 feet. And they're all, there's that's supposed to be Mount Everest there, okay? So here we can see that, and here's the y-axis here. You can barely read this, even with a magnified view. But this is 25,000 feet, has 19.8% of the sightings. 20,000 feet has 28.7, and Everest is about 29,000 feet high. So the sample, like they say, is skewed toward aviators. Okay, I understand that, but the chart really should explain that to people. What they're doing here is, it's the history of today, all right? The history of today. And as AARO and as NASA look at this UFO phenomenon, it started in conceivably, well, okay, they say 1996 in their report, but really it started around the time of the Nimitz experience there in 2004 with Captain Fravor seeing what he saw out there. We all know the story. But that's essentially where the UFO phenomenon starts for AARO. They don't care about the spectacular cases that have occurred in the past. They don't care what Condon had to say. They don't care what Project Blue Book Special Report 14 had to say, which we'll look at. They never make reference to any of this stuff. They never make reference to the fact that, as I've lectured in this room before and told you, that the government was coming to the same conclusions that AARO and NASA has come to back in the late 40s and early 50s. Something's going on, okay? And that should have been the springboard, the framework to move on to find out what is up with the wheat, not the chaff. But we're still getting this breakdown. And it's implied that if we just had better sensor technology, we'll explain all the reports. But I digress a little, but just a little bit. So here you can see this chart. Here is their typically reported UAP characteristics. Again, based on the 291 cases, I would assume. The morphology is round. Well, that's typically reported. I can't deny that. The size 1 to 4 meters. That's what they saw, their witnesses saw. People who have done studies on the shapes and sizes of UFOs over the years generally come down on 25 to 30 feet as being the average diameter or size or length, however you want to think of it, of a UFO. But of course, it's just the history of today. So they don't have any cases that talk about things the size of a football field or a 747 or 30 feet in diameter. They only have basically this 1 to 4 meters. So that's what they tell you. Well, 1 to 4 meters, what could that be? Maybe a balloon because it's round. So it's skewed here, and it gets me really annoyed. A silver color, okay, the velocity stationary to Mach 2. That's kind of interesting. That implies some kind of a powered vehicle of some type made by the US or another country on this Earth, or maybe from someplace else. No thermal exhaust detected. Sometimes UFOs have contrails, but yeah, that's a fairly accurate statement. Again, the 10,000 to 30,000 feet altitude is just for the pilots. And the rest of this stuff down here about radar, intermittent, it's not explained what that is, and you need not concern yourself about that. Okay, this is my pie chart. Let me go back a little bit to Project Blue Book Special Report 14, which came out in 1955. And it was done by the Battelle Memorial Institute in Ohio. It looked at approximately 3,200 cases, I think, but for this pie chart, it's dealing with about 2,200 cases. They looked at all the cases that Blue Book had collected from 1947 to 1952. They reanalyzed them at Battelle. They didn't use people working for the Air Force. They used scientists and people they had, mathematicians there at Battelle. And they individually, in teams, I should say, looked at cases, and they came up with their own set of identified and unidentified sightings. And out of this 2,200, they came up with 434 unknowns. Now, this is what is interesting about this Battelle report. They actually had these unknowns, but they gave the shapes of the unknowns, not the unknowns just of the mass of sightings that include the chaff along with the unknowns. So here you can see the breakdown. But unfortunately, they again did what the arrow did. They used kind of weird categories that we've never really classified UFOs as having rocket and aircraft shape, let alone unidentified ones. But that's what the Blue Book report did. Down here, as you can see, rocket and aircraft was 7.6%. These are unknowns, so I don't quite understand that. We have here a flame. Again, unknown objects that have a flame shape. Again, I don't understand what that means. And the report doesn't go into what it means. They don't describe, flame it's like, it'll have a point on one end, and it'll go down into a bulbous end like a candle flame. That would have been a good thing, but they didn't say that. And anyhow, the only one I could really find that sort of corresponds with what MUFON has used as shapes is down here, lenticular, conical, or teardrop. 5.07%. Keep that in mind, 5.07%. MUFON has a category called shape not stated. MUFON also has a category called other. And those, well, others is fairly common. It could be a weird squid-shaped thing or something shaped like a gear or something. But a number of cases just don't, even MUFON gets them, the witness doesn't say what the shape was. But anyhow, that's how they broke down. Here's my pie chart. I made that other pie chart based on their data. So, and I used the data from MUFON for the year 2022, just 1 year. And I picked I picked shapes. Actually, what I did was I tried to pick shapes that correlated or corresponded to the shapes you just saw on the Blue Book 14 report. But like I said, MUFON doesn't classify by rocket or missile shaped, or we don't have flame shaped in our categories. For what it's worth, MUFON has 25 categories. I didn't make a slide out of it, but they have 25 categories of shapes. Okay, and this is what investigators, when they find a case that's unknown or when it first comes in, they ascribe a shape to it, a cylindrical or disc shape, or some of the less known ones like egg-shaped, Socorro type thing, a flash. Not quite sure what a flash is, but anyhow, I tried to pick out categories that correlated to that Blue Book Special Report 14, and I couldn't really find any, except for MUFON has cone, teardrop, and disc. This is the same as the Project Blue Book report has. So I combined those three categories. Cone and teardrop and disc are three separate shapes in the MUFON hierarchy. And lo and behold, 5.1%. 70 plus years, almost 70 years after the Project Blue Book report came out, using the same, seemingly objects with the same shapes that Blue Book used, we came up with, in the MUFON database, 5.1. The Air Force had, the Battelle people came up with 5.07. Well, rounding off, it's 5.1. That caused the hairs on the back of my neck to rise when I saw that thing. I don't think anyone's really done this with the MUFON data. And this 53.4% here, this huge swath of this pie chart, represents all the other shapes than the ones I've listed there. Okay, so I just couldn't, if I were to put 25 shapes in there, this chart would be really confusing. So I just used, I picked as many as the Blue Book one had, 7 or 8 categories. So that's very odd. Okay, here's, again, this is one I made. I want to see how I'm doing on time here. I may run a little short, so it might not be quite an hour here before I finish. But I wanted to show you this chart that I made up just the other day, October 11th. I picked 8 common shapes out of those 25 shapes that MUFON has, okay? And Tic Tac I picked not because it's especially prevalent in terms of numbers of sightings, but Tic Tac was something that was introduced as a result of the Fravor case in 2004. And the New York Times article in 2017 actually referred to it by name. Fravor said, I saw something that looked like a Tic Tac shape, presumably a short cylinder or tablet shaped or something. But again, we have a definitional problem here. And as a scientist and as anybody who's sort of technically trained or just very intelligent, we need definitions for some of these things. So what was a Tic Tac? Well, we can see from, my chart goes from 2015, 8 years, to 2022. At the very top of the chart is Tic Tac. You can see there's very little Tic Tac shaped things before 2017. By the time you get to 2019, it picks up, and now we have, these are percentages. 3.9% of these cases of unknowns are Tic Tac shaped. What were those before? I don't know. But anyhow, I wanted to show you. But the striking thing about this chart, the thing that you can't avoid seeing, is how all these categories, for example, the gray one right here, or maybe this is green, I'm colorblind. This represents cylinders and cigars. Look at how these numbers stay the same over 8 years. And these are percentages. All these numbers are percentages, not case numbers. They're percentages. I have case numbers, but it looks more interesting like this. The same bands appear with the case numbers as well. Down at the bottom here, circular and disc-shaped objects. I combined the two of them. There's a little variation in these, 23.5% in 2022, 17.7% in 2015. But bear in mind here, we're getting a lot of cases. There's a turnover in MUFON and field investigators. The same people who were working in 2015 are not necessarily working today. So there's the personnel changes. We try to train them. But look how damn consistent those categories are going across the chart. That really, again, raised the hackles or the hairs on my neck. It was a different day from the Blue Book one, so I could have that happen on 2 different days. But to me, this bespeaks a real phenomenon that's not IFOs. And again, I can't reiterate enough. These are investigated cases, okay? These are all cases that a field investigator said, I don't know what the witness or witnesses saw. So they've been curated. Does Sean Kirkpatrick know about this chart or this data? Hell no. Does NASA? No, I don't think so. How would they know? But this is important in determining whether or not UFOs constitute a real phenomenon and whether they should be studied using millions of dollars and taking up people's times and their lives if we go forward with this. We want to know we're not looking at Chinese balloons, okay, or weird patterns of birds, or any of the other things that are IFOs. Okay, getting it down a little more a little simpler and easier to look at here. I've just compared the data on incoming MUFON cases. MUFON is in blue. The National UFO Reporting Center in Washington State is in the other color here. And I guess that's green. But anyhow, MUFON and Peter Davenport, who runs the National NUFORC, as it's called, we get almost the same amount of cases. The one big difference is Peter's cases are not investigated. Very few of them are. He gets 3,000 to 4,000 cases a year, and very few of them are investigated. You can go on the site, nuforc.org, and you can read the witness accounts and see the drawings they make. But again, no one's really talked with most of those witnesses to find out, is this a hoax? Did they misidentify, say, Starlink satellites? We don't really know. But that's how they stack out. And we don't know what the overlap is between NUFORC cases and MUFON cases. Is it an 80% overlap? We could, I guess, find that out, but it would be extraordinarily painstaking. But how many people report to both groups? Unknown. And that's just for this year. And finally, a stack chart here to show you how the incoming cases for 2023 are proceeding here through September. I didn't want to take a partial month again. I'm getting tired of doing that, where the last month is like 4 cases because the investigators haven't gotten to them yet. So I left out October. We can see the main body of these 354 cases for January 2023 means all cases, of which 66 were unidentified. It's not 354 plus 66. It's the unknowns are part of the 354. And so it goes through the month, through the year. As you can see in February, this was the month that the Chinese balloon basically was shot down. I think it was early February, and we first became aware of it in late January. There was an uptick in sightings. Again, these are investigated cases. The unknowns are. So I trust that they weren't balloons. They had a 19.1% unknown rate just from February, but you can see here that May of this year exceeded that. So these things ebb and flow like this all the time. Usually you can see a correlation with the summertime, an increase in sightings in the summertime because more people are outside and days are longer, and so that's how we've at least typically explained it through the years. But this sort of seasonal variation is kind of known to UFO researchers. Whether it's known to the people at NASA and AARO, that's still a factor to be reckoned with. We do not know. Another cartoon. This means that we're changing. We're going from vacuous stuff. You can see the NASA report, the AARO stuff, these charts which sort of home in on the phenomenon and I think are very important, to now we're going to come up to sightings, what people are actually reporting seeing, sort of like Ben and Tony were talking about. Okay, yeah, these cats, you know, they're everywhere, and man, my cat sneaks into the weirdest spots, and so anyone who has them knows they do that. Okay, one more thing here to show you how things are stacking out with regard to sightings, MUFON sightings, and states. How do the states rack out with regard to sightings? Well, you can see California. They always lead. It's a big state. There's a lot of people. Very popular state. Texas or Florida is usually second or third. They change positions. But that's how they fall out. The number here, the first number is the number of cases. So California has, through September, 343 cases, 68 of which have been not explained, unknowns. And some cases are still pending, of course. The investigators don't always get to them in a timely fashion, but these numbers change over time. If I were to do the same chart today, some of these numbers would be increased by a little bit, unknowns and raw numbers of cases as well. Here's the NUFORC sightings for the year. As you can see, 3,069. And total for MUFON was 3,500, so we're exceeding Peter a little bit here this year. What else did I want to tell you about this chart that I didn't put on there because I ran out of room? Maryland stands at 45 cases for the year with 7 unknown. Virginia has 72 cases through October with 19 being unknown. And you can see that MUFON this year through October has 3,500. 2022 had 3,771. it's within the ballpark, still about the same. And we keep getting those cases, that number of cases year after year. Some years we've actually had more, actually. Of late, it's been hovering around 3,000 or 4,000. But you go back to the earlier years in this century, and CMS system, the case management system, started about 2000. There were some years we had 7,000 or 8,000 sightings coming in. Okay. All right, this has a video associated with it. I know there's going to be a problem seeing this thing in the back, or maybe even seeing it in the front here. Let me say, I go through these cases starting about in February. I go through the MUFON CMS system, and I pick out good cases for that year, for that month. I'll pick a group of months usually. And some years I speak here, and some of the cases will knock your socks off. This year they're pretty good, but that's not what I would say the greatest ones, because I have several criteria. One is that the case has to be, if possible, a daylight case. It has to be something with some visual stuff I can show you folks, whether it's a drawing or a video or just a photograph, something I can project out here so you're not looking at just a name or something like that. This particular case happened in Springfield, Missouri, and it has a video. This to the left here is a screenshot of this, what seems like a cylindrical, I hate to say it, a tic-tac shaped object, but maybe the investigator didn't think there were wings on this thing. I don't know, blowing up, I see a little fuzziness there, but anyhow, Sue will hit the video, and let's see what we see. Oh. There it is right there. See, it's hard to see that thing. And it lasts about 52 seconds. This was a man who observed this white object when he was leaving church in the morning, and on that particular date in November, almost a year ago. He estimated the UFO to be a couple miles distant from him, was 30 degrees above the horizon, and he recorded this 52-second video. Of course, the field investigator tried to rule out to the best of his ability airplanes or drones or stuff like that. Does anyone have a question? Okay. There we see it. It eventually goes off into the distance. And when the camera, well, actually, the camera ends, actually, and it still stays there, just sort of an amorphous blob. But that's the best I can give you on that particular case. Let's go to the next one. Okay, 10 January 2023, someplace called Queen Creek, Arizona. That's kind of an interesting case. This too has a video associated with it. I just want to refer to my notes here to be sure I get everything kind of right here. Yeah, a woman went outside to walk her dogs, kind of mid-late in the evening, 9 o'clock or so, and she went out on her patio and took the dogs out there. And she saw a strange object she couldn't identify in the sky, a large white light. And she could also see some planets. I think she saw Jupiter and Sirius or something that were both in the sky at the time. This object was considerably brighter than them. She went in to get her husband to come out and see it, and he brought his cell phone, and he recorded a short video. And before Sue plays it, what you see is how it looks when it's frozen. But yeah, go ahead, Sue.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's shimmering. It had a central core white light with red, green, blue, and I think violet were the other lights that were surrounding this thing. It's kind of odd looking. And the fellow recorded this thing, and then for some period of time, not a long time, 13 or 15 seconds, 42 seconds, I'm a little off there, he said to his wife at the time, okay, I stopped the camera because the object vanished. Well, curiously enough, when they watched the video, the object never did vanish. It just went right up to the end of when he turned the camera off. There was no blank spot there where the object vanished in the sky. So That's kind of an odd, a little high strangeness factor in this case. So yeah, there you have it on that case. Let's go to the next one here. Okay, thanks, Sue. This is an interesting type of a case that I'll explain to you in a little bit more detail. This occurred over Columbia, New Jersey, 1st of February. Here's the objects here in this oval that Sue has cut out. There was only a digital photograph taken in this case. There's not a video. And there's a series of white objects. I think Ben and Tony showed something like this in one of their slides. These objects were seen to go across the sky and arrange themselves in various formations. Like at one point, and the witness said there were something like 50 to 60 of these white objects flying in the sky at the same time. I wish he'd gotten more in the photo, but we have what we have. And these objects would combine and recombine into various formations. He said at one time there were 15 rows of about 3 of them, all proceeding to the sky, through the sky. The whole body of these objects collectively would move, and the objects would recombine into different shapes as they moved off. And these kind of cases, believe it or not, show up very rarely in the UFO phenomenon, but they do show up. In fact, there's one in the Project Sign report that some people saw. I think they were with the Navy in 1948. They described the same thing while they were out camping. 2 guys were out with their families. And they saw a whole bunch of shapes in the sky during the daytime, like 9 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes they'd be in an L-shaped. Then they'd reconfigure themselves into a V-shaped. Then they would all go into a round shape, a circle. And they progressed across the sky until they went out of sight. And I've spoken about a couple of these cases here at Mysteries of Space and Sky in earlier presentations. So these kind of things, again, when they pop up, it seems to me, they give a certain body, a certain consistency to the UFO phenomenon that is so weird. Who would think of these? No one, it's not like the general population reads the Project Sign report. I wish there were 10,000 people coming here to Mysteries, but there isn't. And so they're not hearing this, what you guys are hearing about some of these cases. So there's no reason to make these things up. Let's see, am I missing anything on this one? I think you have the general aspect of it. Yeah, they're about a mile distant, he thought, and then that was it. They just flew off as they continued. Let's go to our next one. Okay, we got it. One May over Makaha Beach in Oahu. Okay, this woman was out about 3 in the morning on the Makaha Beach, a single witness case, and she was looking. I looked this up online to see what Makaha Beach looked like, and it's not Hawaii's prettiest beach, but it's kind of one of these rocky beaches, of which there are a number of them in Hawaii, but there's some nice sand. But it goes up into a series of cliffs, and she was looking over high sort of basaltic stuff along the backside of the beach. She was looking up at those when suddenly she saw this object, which is 2 3-sided pyramids, base to base. And a hexahedron, it would be the mathematical term for this thing. So she drew this. I think it's a pretty good drawing, though it's a little confusing. But she has several views in one thing here. But here's the top pyramid, and here's the bottom one. And here again is a perspective view of them. You can see she's given a 3-dimensional view that actually looks better when it's not blowing up. But it was dark, it was night. This thing had sort of an orangish glow inside it, coming through seemingly translucent panels, like of a glass-like or transparent material. And it stayed literally in front of her, just above these sort of granite peaks, or basaltic peaks, or whatever, and then it just suddenly vanished. And this is another series of cases, and it was about 8 feet long from the lower point to the upper point. So she has like 96 inches there, and 2 feet wide or so, 2 to 3 feet wide at the midpoint. This is another series of cases that intrigues me greatly, because ever since the dawn of the UFO subject, rarely, but it continuously happens, people report seeing jewel-like objects in the sky that behave and operate in an intelligently controlled manner. whether it's a pyramid, whether it's an octahedron, I have several of those, and other shapes, faceted things that look like cut jewelry. And oftentimes they're described as being kind of translucent or having an evanescent kind of a look, but they maneuver around the sky like airplanes. But this makes no sense. There's no lifting surfaces on these things. People never report, oh, there's a large propeller on the bottom giving the thing lift. No, they never report that. They're not kites. They're seen in the day, they're seen in the night. And they're seen not frequently, but enough to keep you thinking, oh my gosh, here's another jewel case. It's just another aspect of the phenomenon we cannot understand. Yeah, here's another, this is going to be a tougher one to see. This case was in Cumberland, Maryland on 3 May, a place that I've spoken in. And I think Sue spoke there, and maybe, Larry Arnold, Larry's art here, he was in Cumberland, Maryland for some of the info conferences that Phyllis Benjamin had out there. And so this person actually saw, if it doesn't come, that's all right, Sue. Yeah, just a ball of light. I hate to say it, but that's what it was. There's nothing too exciting about it, but it was making right-angle turns in the sky. And when you see this video, it's not tremendously long. It seems to make some turns and everything that the witness, or the field investigator, couldn't decide whether the camera was moving or whether the object was actually moving in the sky. But he did finally convince himself sort of that, well, I think the object is actually moving. And the person who saw this took a very short video of it because he was driving at the time on an overpass and in Cumberland, some kind of a park or something. And it was around 8 o'clock at night, I believe. And another car was coming toward him, so he was sort of maneuvering and trying to get this object videoed with his cell phone. And he was an avid, he was a space enthusiast. He knew the International Space Station when he saw it cross the sky. He even says in his comments to the MUFON investigator that he saw the Chinese space station once. Wow, how many people have seen that? And other things. So he thought this looked odd enough. He was familiar with how satellites operated that he filed his report with MUFON. And so you're not missing a whole lot with the video, but it's still an interesting case. Oh, there it goes. It's moving suddenly. It's alive.
It's been moving, such as it is.
It's just 8 seconds. Okay, we're going to the next case here. This is an interesting case, too. 4 May in Redford, Michigan. I've since lost my place here for these things, but that's all right. This was a woman outside, and she saw this thing come above the horizon over her house. It was directly over their house, and she described it as being the old triangle-shaped objects. She did not take a photo of it, but it had a light cream-colored aspect to it, and it had a dome on the bottom there that you see in the center here. This is the underside of the object you're looking at, so the dome was protruding downwardly, and there was I think it was a bluish light or something like that was coming out of the, it was another green light coming out of the center of that dome, and white lights around the periphery along the sides of the triangle. And she could only see one edge of the thing, or 2 edges of the thing in the bottom. She never got or the witness never got an idea of what was going on top of the object. Okay, this is a single photograph by itself. Let me get right up on this thing because it's kind of, okay, here we go. Yeah, this was a Fresno, California case in June, a daytime case. This was a college student. A woman was had some reason to go on a community college and in Fresno, and her business was done in the administration building. She was walking back to her car. No, this is Columbia City. That's the next case up. Boy, that's the problem with having your notes on several different pages. So yeah, this was the father and the son, and sitting outside, and they basically had, and it's not shown here, but the picture's a little bit bigger, and it shows woods on the left, woods on the right, and this what looks like a rectangular object goes from one side to the other between the two stands of trees. They both saw it. And I swear, for the last 10 years here at MSS, I usually give an example of a case that has a photograph of a rectangular object. And they always look about the same. They said they thought it was cylindrical, and possibly it is here. It looks to me more like a rectangle. But anyhow, it went across the sky in a pretty short period of time and just vanished. But these damn rectangles are another thing that people have some pretty clear photographs of. Like I say, I've shown some of them here. And I would think that Arrow and ultimately NASA would be interested in these pictures. They're not dots of light in the sky. They're clear objects, and they always sort of have these rectangles always sort of have the same proportions, the proportions of about like a cigarette pack or something like that. And but there you have it. Okay, here was the one I was alluding to with the college student coming back to her car from on campus. This was a case in the in the morning, 9:28, 9:30 in the morning. She saw this cream-colored object directly above her when she was looking up at birds and trees. The birds were making charming sounds, and she was just, oh wow, what a beautiful day here. I don't have college yet. It's out for the summer. And she looked up, and like literally above her head, at 90 degrees up, was this. She described it as sort of a triangular object with a notch in the back. You could also see it as a V-shaped object, but it had these straight lines just going across it from top to bottom. No idea what they are. It was seen against a blue sky, completely silent, no sound heard here, and she gave us this drawing. So in a way, we're all seeing the object, okay? And it had a length of about 11 to 30 feet. So as it was in that range that I say the average size of UFOs being around 30 feet, that's what it fell into. I have not been able to find a correlating case in sighting history yet, but I'm going to keep my eye out for something that someone maybe reported in the 1950s or 60s or something that had these kind of lines going across this thing. But I only found out about this case relatively recently. So, but if it's out there, I would like to think I'll find a copy of it, or someone else seeing the same thing. Okay. Here was a case over Happy Union, Texas, and as you'll see, this object was seen in the sky over a wind turbine farm, and the witnesses were two technicians who were traveling out to do some service work on these wind turbines. And they were driving in a car getting to the site, which is huge. And here we see it. It's going as I speak on the right-hand side here. There's the object. Now the first fellow who saw this said this thing was going straight up, he said, and there was a prevailing 20-mile-an-hour wind, obviously going horizontally across the turbines at that point, hopefully turning the turbines and giving us some power. But the thing rose up through the wind and then maneuvered around. And he homed in on it a little bit. They both agreed it looked like a propane tank, a 1,000-pound propane tank that's in people's homes. I've never really seen one of those, but I've seen the smaller ones. But that's what he said it looked like. And if you can get it going again there, Sue?
Okay.
Yeah, just while I'm speaking. One of the fellows called up the office that they reported to, their supervisors, and he said, hey, do you guys have anybody out here releasing balloons or drones over the wind turbines today? And they said, no, we don't have anybody out there doing that. It's not that we know of. But there you have it. It's a longitudinal axis. It's not, a lot of the times we'll see these cigar-shaped things, traveling with the longitudinal axis parallel to the ground. This one's vertical. The field investigator thought it might have been a balloon, but man, the witnesses weren't buying it. They said, geez, it's moving against the wind, and they saw it from several different vantage points as they drove around. So a very odd thing. And now I'm coming up to my last case. Oh, I'm right about it on time. And I credit the artwork on this case to Sue. she put it in the presentation just this morning, occurred in Scotts, Michigan, in late July. A fellow went out in the morning to, there had been a storm the night before, and a fellow went out to pick up sticks on his lawn. It's something we're all familiar with if we own homes, picking up sticks. And I think his dog was out there or something, but anyhow, he's picking up these sticks. It's a grassy area. There's woods beyond at the end of his yard. And he hears this buzzing sound, slowly growing in volume as he's bending over, actually. And he thinks it's mosquitoes. So he just brushes at his ear like this, thinking it's a mosquito. And he looks up, and this softball-sized brown object just flew 2 feet past his head, a dull brown shape and dull brown color right past his head, and just flew into the woods among the trees. And okay, it's like a 2-second sighting. Okay, I'm not going to pretend this has a lot of time, but that was it. And I will tell you that, again, here's a class of cases that these spheres that fly very close to people, I can find to a handful of them throughout UFO history. Sometimes they actually hit into things. There's a picture in Kenneth Arnold's book, The Coming of the Saucers, with Ray Palmer, written in about 1950 or so, that have pictures in there of a truck, like a van that was hit by one of these spheroidal objects back then in 1947 or 1948. The driver was in it when he put his head out the window or something. The thing like banged off the top of the thing. And in the MUFON Journal, about 2 years ago, I think, in it's the summer of 2021, or conceivably the summer of 2022, there's an excellent report in there by an investigator. I think he's from New Zealand. And I think this case occurred in New Zealand. This fellow and his girlfriend were driving down a road when it was dark, somewhat later in the night, 10, 11 o'clock in the night, and this orb came toward the car and impacted the windshield. The driver was killed. If you have a chance to see the journal for that, look back through those months there if you subscribe to the journal and read that account. It's quite chilling, and it's quite well investigated. And that is the end of my presentation here. And I thank you for your kind attention here. It's just great to have an audience who really loves this subject. And that means a lot to us speakers, believe me. And again, I thank Sue and Peter for having this conference. And let's see what we can do in the coming year to follow the UFO subject. Thank you.